And our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. We'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And I wrote in the chat room in response to what you all were talking about, Susan and Ellen, one time, well, actually several times, but I have often gotten emotional and cried when teaching in a women's intensive. And during one intensive, there was one woman who afterwards told me, she says, never do that again. You don't want to do that. The teacher has to be in control. And I'm like, it apparently brought something up for you, but I think that it's totally okay and open and honest, and actually, helps the students to see that, we are just people just like they are, and that we get triggered. And it was actually a perfect teaching tool for me to, I was doing a worksheet in front of the class on Ryan, and when I got to the goal, then I used the abbreviated worksheet. And so it has, for the goal, I wanted him to have a better job. This was back when he was waiting tables right after college. And so that I can, and the part of it was that I would feel like I was a successful mom. And I got emotional and cried. Well, there was, a couple of people in the class, and they were like wanting to give me sympathy and all this, and I was like, no. I said, this is the perfect example. I said, this is not about my son, it's about me. And this is my opportunity to look at what is it that I'm hiding from myself about myself. And I was able to turn it into more of a teaching tool that showed them more accurately what it was about to do the worksheet, instead of glossing over it and pretending like, I was all really okay, and all this. So I think it's absolutely fine and perfect to be real in front of the other people that are in the class, whether you're the facilitator, teacher, whatever you want to call it. And I learn a lot by being there and really being present. So I think it's awesome. And welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Honored and delighted that you're here once again as we move forward in this conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness. And we had announced, you maybe missed us on Thursday and Friday, or maybe you didn't miss us at all. Hopefully the shows that Jeannie picked out were powerful. But we took a sabbatical. We had a time frame where Arya Rain was not going to be here with us, and Jeannie's brother came and picked up her dad. So we had 5 days on our own. And speaking of emotion moving, you remember that Jeannie had a major opening a couple of weeks ago where she was told that she was going to go through 5 measures of healing. And one of those measures happened this weekend for both of us. We basically turned off our phones, didn't talk to anybody, turned off our computers, and just were alone. Just did a lot of breathing, a lot of energy field work, listened to music, and just were by ourselves. And one of those measures opened, and it opened for both of us in a very powerful way. And brings tears up for me. So I think it's perfectly appropriate, to be honest. Deception is never going to bring healing. Would you like to share, Jeannie, what the measure was, and then I'll share what happened for me in the context of it? It was powerful.
There were actually
absolutely
2
awesome
measures. Yeah, it was. It was just a time to go inside. I mean, we did a lot of work and a lot of physical stuff. We actually fasted 2 of the days, and so we were physically ready to go into the process too, instead of numbing ourselves down. But my first one was actually an awakening, and it was a point where I went into still point, and normally, you come back out of still point with kind of a startle or whatever sometimes, taking a breath. But this one was actually a gasp. I felt like I was jerked back into this reality, not actuality. But the sorrow and the terror and all that, I think we had shared about that before we actually took this sabbatical, and I, for some reason, didn't count that as a measure, but it was definitely a measure, and that was coming back to the point of when I gave up being, and there was just such sorrow and such terror about stepping out of that into the non-being. And then the second one was during this 5 days, and it was about trust and trusting myself and Michael, but trusting God. And instead of thinking that I had to take care of things or figure things out, and that, that to believe in what he tells us and to actually just be, and that it was safe. And there were times, when Michael and I had processed a week or so ago, we had shared, that I had actually shared with him some things that I had never told anyone in my life about the abuse that I went through when I was 3 years, between 16 and 19 years old. And I had never told anyone. And so that happened again as far as being in a safe enough space just to open up and to talk about what was going on, what thoughts were going through my head and things that I had experienced. But it was different. It was like being able to tell about it and share it and, kind of be honest about what had happened and things and get it out there. But yet a lot of it I was able to share without the emotional upset around it. It was, you hear Michael often say, be the thinker apart from the thought and the feeler apart from the feeling and the actor apart from the action. And I really experienced that, to be able to just look at it like, this was part of a movie of my life and things that happened, but I didn't have to be emotionally attached to it any longer and was able to let it go. And it was an awesome time. And
or
there was
traumatized.
So much stuff. Right.
Attached or traumatized by it.
Yeah. In one of our sessions, one of the things that had come to me during the breathing process and the energy work, and, we did a lot of work around their cranial and the cranial base and the hip area and areas where I had trauma before, especially and that it's connected to the cranial. And that was really amazing, that it was like when something would pop in one area, I could feel it in the other. And just an opening and feeling it. My body at one point felt like it was so expanded, like it was bigger than just the physical, that, it was like I could put my arms out and actually feel my field. And so just a lot of things like that. It was just an awesome time just to be alone and to be disconnected. And we had told everybody, I had my phone where, like Ryan and Gabby and Dad, my brother, certain people that, if they really needed to get a hold of me, that their message would come through my phone, even though it was on Do Not Disturb. But otherwise, we didn't talk to anybody. And we'd open the door once a day to get the mail out of the mailbox or the packages off the porch. But other than that, we didn't even go out of the house. And it was just phenomenal. And we found some music that was, it's just a combination of music that just takes you into another spiritual space. I said some of my favorite songs that was in it, the words were from India. So I didn't even understand the words, but just the vibration of the music was phenomenal, and just to spend time in that. And it was just an awesome time, and we thank everybody for holding the space and sending love and support and just being willing to step back and let us have that time. I know Michael's phone goes off constantly, and so it was awesome just to have each other's attention totally. So, and I could go on, but anyway, you go ahead, Michael, and you share.
Well, for me, there were several things that were reinforced, and deep appreciation for the years of work. What I recognized in some work we did a couple of weeks ago, and I did share on the show, is that when we're open, when we're the space where love, literally, the molding energy of the universe can really enter, it really does collapse perception. Instead of, oh, there's this old trauma and there was this and they did that and this and that literally, when we can get to the point where love is present enough, the whole perceptual system collapses. And I just am so appreciative of all the work, years of doing the work, so I could recognize what was happening as it happened. And so, when Jeannie touched into that, it wasn't like, and we've done a little bit of work, like a minuscule amount of work over the years around that. And I shouldn't say minuscule because there was some pretty tough stuff, but it was done with trauma present. But in this new space, there was no perceptual construct of the mind. It was just processing the energy of those experiences directly, rather than having to process through the drama and trauma of it. So that was really powerful. And you perhaps have heard me speak before about an opening that I had back about 40 years ago, where literally my mind was not in this world. And I could literally, I could see through the structure of the walls. I could see the energy field in which I was existing. And the level of joy, the level of the presence of love was just monumental. And I had the memory as we were touching in, it was like a similar opening. And I had the memory of when that happened 40 years ago and how excited I was. And it was just like, oh, I knew there was a reason for doing the work. I knew there was a different place to live. Yes. And in that space, any question that I asked, I was given an immediate nonverbal but verbal answer. Something was explained to me verbally, although there was no voice, and I was given a visual picture. And when I went into that space of, yes, I knew there was another place to live, I immediately got the answer back, well, Michael, you've had a taste of it, but if your instrument, i.e. your body, isn't wired for it, if you haven't done the work, then you'll burn it out. At which point I said, okay, I'll go back. I'll keep doing my work. And so went into that opening again this weekend on a new level. I've had tastes of it, little tastes here and there for a day or two over the last 50 years. But this was full blown, and I realized that, like on a whole new level, that literally this structure, I thank God for the medical training that I've had and for the information I've been given over the years about, and those who have done an intensive where we've taught energy field work, how I teach that the bony structure, the head, the spine, and the pelvis are literally the antenna, that when properly structured, literally the proper shape, because the shape of an antenna determines the frequencies it receives, that's what we're meant to capture, just like, the antenna for channel 2. If you've got a proper antenna for channel 2, it captures channel 2 and reflects it into the signal into the TV set. So it was just reinforced that, and both of us, I did a lot of work, just hours of work on Jeannie's neck, more work than I've ever done on anybody on their neck. And I don't know, Jeannie, how many times? 15 different times there'd be crack, crack, pop, pop, not adjusting her, just holding the spaces where there was trauma held and opening. And it became clear to me, and I was so thankful for being given that information 30 years ago, that this was an antenna. And for both of us, as the antenna came into alignment, it was just such a powerful physiological presence of love. It was just monumental, and the way processing happened at that point, it was just beyond having to process perceptual constructs about trauma, rather processing directly through the presence of love, the energy of trauma. And I just put that out as, there's where we want to head. There's what we want to learn to do, and the building of the brain cells. And I realized all these years of building the brain cells, and when it came back to me from 40 years ago about, wow, this is such a great place to live. Well, if your structure isn't ready for it, it'll burn it up. And at that point, I said, okay, I'll go back and do my work. And I just realized the value of 40 years from then to now of doing that work and of building the brain cells so I could recognize what was happening. Building the brain cells is such an important concept because I realized that if I hadn't had the brain cells, I wouldn't have known what was happening. I wouldn't have been able to say what I'm saying. And so 40 years may seem like a long time to somebody. To me, it was like a heartbeat, and so worth it. And on the trust issue, there was a point where Jeannie was tapping into that, and I went over and I just said, can I lean back on you? And I just leaned back on her belly and was just, in that space. And I don't know how long I was there, honey, 10, 15 minutes. And what came to me, the realization that came to me, was I had not been in that safest space or that much trust since I was a small child with my mother. And I'm not even sure how to say it, was just the energy of that realization was kind of like coming home and just overwhelmingly sweet and awesome. And so I just hold the space for everyone to, be ready to move to the next level as we all build the brain cells together and move into this literally restructuring the energetic assault that we've experienced physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And almost like, with a car that's been in an accident, for the car to look right, you got to bang out the dents and get it back into its proper shape. That's exactly what has to happen with this bony structure of the head, the spine, and the pelvis. It needs to go back to its original condition and remove the assaults that have happened to get back to the point where it moves through proper range of motion. When the baby's soft spot hardens, we think the head is now fixed, but actually the head is not fixed at all. If you're tuned into it in a subtle way, you'll find that the head is the whole structure, literally right down into the deep sinuses and the bones of the whole skull are in motion. And it can't bring in what it's designed to bring in. Well, the system is aligned with hate and fear and rage and guilt and pain and drama and trauma. The forgiveness work removes the energetic assaults of those things, and once removed, then we can literally process the whole structure until it's back into its proper form. And in its proper form, literally, the structure of our bodies, so-called bodies, is the antenna that captures and reflects love into our internal space. And, to me, on the other side, especially of this weekend, it's just so obvious that that's where we're designed to live. And the only reason we do hostility or fear is because we've been assaulted genetically or in our own lives with hostility or fear. And when you think about that power person dynamic, when you realize that the child, when those three things happen that create a power person dynamic in a child or an adult, it doesn't have to be necessarily a child, although more likely it came from childhood, that when there's somebody in your life that's got more power over your life than you do, when they're not functioning as a human being, they're not functioning as love, And whatever is happening, the recipient of that energy experiences the circumstance as survival, whether it's physical survival, emotional survival, mental survival, psychological survival, physical survival. When those three things occur, literally, the child's energy field opens wide and becomes a sponge and just sucks in. The parent who's raging, the child whose field opens there, just absorbs all of that rage energy. And then in future times, when under deep stress, that energy that was taken on from the power person is simply re-radiated, and we do exactly what our power person did to us that we hated the most. And it's just an automatic energetic reaction until forgiveness is sufficiently applied to that trauma energy. Then when the stress is so high that that's activated, there's no control. It isn't that parent who beat their child, canceled the thought, wanted to beat their child. It's just that the beatings they got when the stress became so high, that energy just takes over and expresses. And as forgiveness is applied, and that's the work, and doesn't happen overnight, especially if you come from a trauma-based family system or a trauma-based culture. And we probably live in one of the most trauma-based cultures in the world right now, in America. And so to apply forgiveness each time that surfaces so that we can free ourselves of that. And having hammered the dents out, especially in the cranial structure, which reflects, in anatomy class, one of the things you learn is that in utero, there's a point where the jawbone literally, sits on top of the pelvis. And they are resonating energetic cavities or structures, antennas. And when the spine grows up and they separate, what happens in the head happens in the pelvis. What happens in the pelvis literally, energetically happens in the head. And until we get conscious and go beyond all of that generational insanity, then we literally become energy fields that simply resonate and absorb all that we're tuned to through those generational patterns. That's what was called in the ancient teachings, living in the desert, living in the state of unconsciousness. And the average person, if you go back and read the ancient scriptures about that, they'll tell you the average person lives there about 40 years in the desert, 40 years in that state of unconsciousness. And the solution, if you go back and read that passage, and it wasn't about being lost in a hot, sandy place for 40 years. It was being unconscious in our responses to life for 40 years, just playing out the power person dynamic. What did they say had to happen to get out of the desert into what was called the Promised Land? What was the Promised Land? The land where you are fueled and energized by active present love, as you're designed to do. What had to happen? They said the old generation had to die off. And that did not mean that everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in the structure from 1,000 generations of, just look at the history of our planet, the insanity that's gone on. And we need to get to the point where we've so weakened those energy fields emanating from those so-called, or what we could use as a metaphor, those dents in the structure of the car, the dents in them. And we've so weakened that through forgiveness that can no longer take over and control. And as you apply each piece of forgiveness, and it seems like, well, Michael, that's so much work. Well, okay, but guess what? You don't get the result if you don't do the work. It's just the way it is. And if you're the early adopter in your family system, in your culture, we're not talking about church here, or churchianity. We're talking about the actual work that the man Yeshua presented. when he said, you must forgive from your heart the wrongs of your brother, that wasn't a bleeding heart statement. You've got to, from your heart. That wasn't it. The heart is the unconscious. You've got to remove. You must, if you want the result. Now, if you don't want the result, you don't have to do it. Carry on with all the drama and trauma you want, and all the rage and hate and fear and all the crazy stuff that happens in the culture. It's your choice. You can do that. But as you step in and begin to do the work, and it takes time to understand what that means, you're hammering out the dents. And, when that old hate event gets processed out, it's literally replaced by the physiological presence of love. And one of the things that has brought up several layers of emotion and tears for me is all the years wasted in not living there, realizing that it was always possible, and just the years that were, and I use the word wasted not properly, because it wasn't wasted at all. It was doing the work to arrive at a result that probably, at least nobody I can think of in my bloodline, to some degree perhaps my mom, but other than that, I can't think of anybody in my bloodline that could even conceive of what I'm even talking about. So that was that, and we're just scratching the surface of what we processed.
Yeah, when you say,
go ahead, sweetie.
When you say not even being able to conceive what we're talking about, it's really challenging to find the words to even describe what we've described already. It's just like there are no words. You have to have been there, I guess. It was amazing.
Yeah, several times I would say to Jeannie, as a new wave of that energy would come in, I would say to Jeannie, now I know what he meant when he said there's so many things I want to tell you, but you can't hear him yet. It's like you just don't have the brain cells for it. There's no way to even comprehend it. And they were the points where there was such deep appreciation for the fact that the universe kind of pushed me, and I kind of chose to do my work and ended up doing this as my livelihood, and just feel so blessed by it. Pretty profound. The time that this happened back 40 or so years ago, I was actually teaching. I had a Wednesday night class every week in Delray Beach, Florida. And I was still in that experience the next week. And I got up to speak about it on Wednesday night. And I don't know, I had that class there for 6, 7, 8 years. This was, probably in the 5th year or so. And I got up and I tried to speak about it, and I was so overwhelmed, I just broke down in tears and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this class tonight, and just left. I just couldn't say anymore. I just couldn't be with it. So it's pretty awesome, and we're here to hold the space and help to build the brain cells for anybody that's ready to go there. Another piece that came to me in the process were the words that even the Greeks admit were left in the original Aramaic. The words from Yeshua on the cross, where the Greeks tell us that he said, the Greek translation says that the words Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani were, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Which is really quite a brilliant trick if you want to keep people in trauma. Here you've got someone that you're calling God, Yeshua, hanging on a cross, and he's lamenting to God that he's been abandoned by God. Just go through that mental trick and see how hopeless and helpless that leaves people. The actual words, or the actual translation of those words, is much more akin to, Ah, Papa, Papa, for this you set me aside. Not forsaken as abandoned, but preserved for a special purpose. And it was said not with dejection or rejection, but with excitement. And 2 different times as I was going through some of this deep process, when Jeannie was basically facilitating me, those words just came in like with this full flood of sweetness of, oh, I got it. This is what we humans have been preserved for with all this insanity. This is what we have been set aside for. Every one of us. Every one of us. It's in our design to live that. And it's our birthright. So I'm sure other things will pop up to speak about, Jeannie, but do you have any other thoughts before we check for callers?
Just one of the things that also, and I haven't delved into the depth of it or anything, but during one of the breath sessions, my stomach actually hurt, and what came to me was the roots going into the earth. But then in another breath session later, I saw an upside down tree, and the roots were going up to heaven. And so I think that's a shift in seeing that I'm really rooted and grounded in the heavenly, not in the earthly.
That's the shift that's needed for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are no hands up. If anybody has a question about anything that we've just been sharing, or about anything else, then press 1 and it puts a hand up. And if nobody has a question, then I guess we go back to reading. And I'm not sure where we left off, back like about it's probably last Wednesday.
Yep. Just give me a second here.
And we did have a hand just go up too.
Well, let's go ahead, and then once we complete that conversation, we'll go into the reading.
541, you're on the air.
Thank you. I just didn't know whether I was muted or unmuted. I kept pushing the one button and disconnecting myself from you. This is Celinda.
Welcome, young lady.
Yes. I wanted to let you know that I have not been dragging my heels about getting my thoughts about the drawing you made on Facebook. It's that I keep going down the white rabbit hole of my mind, and it's like I'm being told, wait, and you have more to learn. And so I haven't done that for that reason. And I just got in on your conversation, and I know that I have much more to learn. So I'm listening.
Don't we all?
Right. I also wanted to share with you and Jeannie that I've been working with the Course in Miracles for 3 months now, and it just is not my messenger. I understand the message of it, but I keep going down the rabbit hole of my mind. And so I would like to offer that whole course, the teacher's manual, the course and the workbook, to anyone who would like it. I feel like I'm being very strongly led to keep things more simple in my life, and I was wondering if that would be something I could share with the Kaburas Institute or with any of the members that watch the show.
Sure, if you want to mail it in this direction, unless somebody comes up and gives Jeannie an address, you can do it in the chat room or what have you, or send it by email, and we'll pass it on to you. If you want to mail it in our direction,
great.
We'll make sure it gets into the hands of someone who will use it.
Right, and I was also going to ask Magda, but I needed your thoughts on it first. Was I could send it also to her and have her put it in the retreat center. That's another possibility. It's just what works best for you all. I just need something more, a little more. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you want to send it to us here in Virginia, since Heartland is not open at this point, there's no activity there, so there wouldn't be anyone to see it there.
Yes, I definitely want to share it, and it's not about the message; it's about the messenger, and I'm sure you understand that. Thank you so much. I'm just focusing on the Aramaic Gospel, the Why Again materials, and my personal inclinations, mystical Christians work, and also Rumi and those sorts of things. So I just want to let you know I'm not falling off the train track. I'm
cool.
Yeah,
of course.
Cool. Thank you.
Tell me what you used the phrase a couple of times. Your mind going down the rabbit hole. Tell me what that means for you.
Well, it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland, and it's just the labyrinth of my mind, my human figure-it-out mind. So I want to be listening more closely to spirit, which means for me, I have a very powerful mind. I'm not dissing it, and at the same time, I'm feeling that spirit is saying, okay, Celinda, what you need is solitude, silence, and stillness with me. And that's what leads me more to the, like Meister Eckhart and other Christian mystics and mystics of other faiths. And they bring me back to Yeshua.
Yeah. My input there would be that Yeshua had this tool, which the Course also teaches, for stilling the mind, and that tool is called forgiveness. And when you recognize that your mind has what the Course calls a trifling treasure, oh, look at this rabbit hole, look where I can take you with this, how exciting is this? That's the point where you step in and recognize that is being driven by a goal, and the way you clean up that part of your mind is not to ignore it, but to recognize the goal that's driving that process in you and collapse that process. And that would be the equivalent of what I referred to earlier as banging out the dents in the car.
Exactly. And I agree with you 100%, and that's why I'm choosing to keep your enlightenment book and also all of the tools of Why Again very close to my heart, and I'm working them.
I
just need a little simpler language. Pardon?
Yeah. Have you sat down with the enlightenment book yet and done the translation from the dictionary in the back for Matthew 5?
I don't know if I've gotten to Matthew 5, but I'm working my way through the book. And I have started on the gospel part. Okay, just one moment. Let me get a piece of paper, please.
Sure.
I'm here.
Yeah. An exercise that I suggest everybody do that buys the Enlightenment book from us is that you go to Matthew 5, and that's the Beatitudes, and the key words are left in Aramaic in brackets. Ignore the translations that's there, and just use the dictionary in the back to do your own translation of Matthew 5. It's profound.
Okay, I have done that, and I will do it again, I will keep doing it along with the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, I usually offer that to everybody that buys the book, so I probably did offer that to you when you first got it, but it's a powerful exercise to do. And for me, it was actually the second time that I was in the middle of doing that translation work. This goes back 35 or so years ago, and that's when I realized that the Beatitudes are not a nice philosophy, but they're a set of instructions. This is how to produce a result. And from the Aramaic perspective, it's pretty profound.
Yes, I really appreciate that. And I feel like I don't remember you telling me, but it doesn't matter because I got put there anyway.
Whatever. Yeah, good.
And so I appreciate you. And Jeannie, thank you. You take care, and let me hang up.
All right, young lady, you have a blessed one.
You too. Love you both.
All right, take care. All righty, bye-bye.
Bye.
Awesome.
All right, so
we have 19 minutes.
Well, for those who want to follow along in the book, we're on page 48 in our reading of Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's the last couple of paragraphs on the chapter on, or in the chapter on what is projection externalization. And we just finished sharing a key thought with Richard, and that was we tend to dislike and resist in others what we dissociate from in ourselves. In other words, we point a finger at someone else for that which is an energy in us that is resonated that we want to remove from ourselves, or we want to get rid of. We want to pretend isn't in us. And if someone were doing something that, the whole world, let's say the whole world would consider terrible and awful and disgusting and all those adjectives you could possibly use, if you don't have that vibration, if you don't have that energetic pattern in yourself, you would simply be the state of active love for that person who's doing that thing. When you go into some form of hostility or fear in what appears to be toward them, and here's our projection externalization, what appears to be hostility or fear toward them, always, 100% of the time, the hostility or fear is about the part of you that you've dissociated from that does the same thing. In fact, you go back, you can listen to Paul, and Paul says, beware you who judge another, for that in which you judge another, you have been guilty of practicing. And this is what he's talking about. So when I find myself in resistance or dislike of another, now that doesn't mean that I can't objectively assess what someone's doing and choose to hold them accountable for a behavior that's off the mark. But if I try to hold them accountable out of my hostility or fear, I have a problem. I'm the one who's dissociating from, projecting, and externalizing what's in me that I don't like. And so we just shared that thought with Richard. And then I offer him the thought, if you mistake them, quote unquote, as the cause of your reality, of your upset, and of your feelings, you will seem to be a victim of them and tend to dislike or hate them. If you know how feelings are formulated within yourself and take corrective action, that is, forgive, each painful situation will simply be your opportunity to heal. Richard quips, well, why should I forgive them? I didn't suggest forgiving them, Richard. I suggested forgiving the realities in your mind. True forgiveness does not mean letting someone else off the hook. You can't forgive anyone for anything. True forgiveness is a tool for changing realities in your own mind. I'd like to take that topic up in more detail later. And so that's the completion of Chapter 8, what is projection externalization. And, of course, we'll be talking more and more about what true forgiveness means. You'll notice that we live in a Greek-oriented culture. It's totally steeped in Greek philosophy. And the Greek philosophy says, they're the ones who made you mad. It's all their fault. That's why you're in pain. But it's okay. You just forgive them. And when we do that, if you go back into the scriptures, you hear the Greek translations of the scriptures over and over and over again, saying, forgive them, forgive them, forgive them. And I can remember when I first started working with the Aramaic, and this was kind of a difficult one for me to capture, to understand at first. But there are two words that are injected in the Aramaic each time that somebody says, forgive your brother, forgive yourself, forgive, 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 forgive. And the two words are that instead of the sentence in Aramaic saying, forgive your brother, it says, forgive as to your brother. So if you and I interact and you're my brother, and you do behavior that arouses rage in me, in the Greek languaging, I'd say, and you made me so rageful, but it's okay, I'll let you off the hook for my rage, which, of course, totally leaves my rage intact. In Aramaic, Yeshua would say, Michael, forgive as to what your brother just brought up in you. Your brother brought up rage. Now, forgive as to that rage. Apply forgiveness to that rage and free yourself from it. And when you realize that these energetic patterns of fear and hatred and rage and guilt and grief and drama and trauma have been going on for so many generations, our desert, our unconscious, is just full of that stuff. And the fact that, pretty much everybody's doing it, it looks pretty convincing when you listen to the conversations of the world that it's all somebody else's fault. Jeannie was reading an article this morning about a preacher who's whining and complaining about cancel culture and how terrible it is. And then the article mentions how sometime earlier, and I didn't look into it any deeper, but sometime earlier, he and another preacher had actually set up and played this cancel culture game. So he'd been playing it out with others, but was whining because it had been turned on him. And he was one of the ones that started the whole cancel culture game, wanting to get rid of something he didn't like. So just recognize that every time you read into any text that's founded in Aramaic, if it says forgive your sister, forgive God, forgive whoever, it's always forgive as to. That is, as to what they've brought up in you. You apply forgiveness to what's coming up in your mind to remove it from your structure. And as you do that, it's like one of those dents in the car. You just hammered another one out. You just hammered another one out. You just hammered another one out. And as Yeshua said 2,000 years ago, a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. When you get enough of those dents hammered out, that's the end of living in that energetic pattern of hostility or fear. That's when you're freed from it. And the whole game becomes something significantly different. So that's what we're here to support and here to understand. And Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
Nope. Well, I think Celinda might have pressed one again. Let me check. Celinda, did you mean to press one again? No, maybe not. Okay. Then nobody has a hand up. We have 11 minutes. We have plenty of time.
Yes, we have time for another powerful conversation. And if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you in our control panel, the call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you dial that number, you'll be listening to the show on your phone. And then if you have a question for us or a comment, push 1, and that raises a hand in the phone queue. And Jeannie, you want to chat with us.
Well, they switched places on the switchboard, so either Susan or Celinda pressed 1. So you're back on the air.
Okay. This is Susan on this end.
Hey, welcome, young lady.
Thanks. I think it's probably kind of hard for anybody to open the mouth because of what you just told us, which is just an amazing story, and I realize you couldn't even tell it, but thanks for trying. I do have a question.
It's beyond profound.
Right.
It's kind of like the culmination of years of work and reaching a whole new level of process for both of us, a whole new level of willingness. And the other thing that I can say is that there's just a whole new level of the presence of love in our home, which is just beyond words to speak about.
That's wonderful.
It is. And of course, with there being that new level of love in the presence of our home, is in the presence of our radio show and our support of you. And so we all get to share the gift.
Well, that's great. Thanks. I've been doing my homework of listening to the videos from the last round. And there was one story you told that I didn't understand. It was about a woman who was in an abusive marriage, who wanted to punch her husband and finally got enough. I mean, first she was just taking it, and then she attacked him physically. And then she went back to him because she was so full of love. Do you remember that? Because I don't know if I even remember it right.
Keep talking. I'm not remembering.
Filters. That's the story about the flipping filters from fear to love and then back to hostility.
Right. Okay. Now I recall what it is we're talking about. So what I was sharing in that story is that not that it was a factual, here's what happened to a particular individual, but the difference between looking through hostility or fear or Rachma, and that when hostility is active, the mind is always going to show us something that is irritating about our object of attention. When fear is active, the mind is always going to structure a perceptual construct that we will consider threatening about that object of attention. And that when Rachma, that condition that Yeshua said was first order in the law, was active, then that same mind is going to produce a construct based in love toward that object of attention. So I used it as an example of, we've all heard about the woman who was being so abused, and we went and helped her to get out of the house and get free of that abuse because she was always living in threat. Fear was always active. And, you know, we helped her to get into a shelter, and now she's in the shelter, and, you know, she calls us 2 weeks later and said, would you drive me back home? And we said, what do you mean? You just got out of that abuse. Well, yeah, but, and we've all heard the words, I love him. The filter of fear has become stilled down, has lowered in its resonance enough that the mind is no longer producing that reality of threat, but rather, I want to go back. And, you know, whatever is firing in the mind at any given moment, for the average person, the mind believes that it is the truth and the end all and the be all, will always be that way. And then, you know, when we finally agreed, okay, I'll take you back, it didn't take her long to remember why she left, because fear is activated again, and now she's in threat. But this time she goes into such deep rage that her mind no longer is showing her anything, quote unquote, that she seems to love about this object of attention or this person. It's no longer showing her something threatening about this person. She's just pure peeved, and she'll take him apart. She doesn't see any threat anymore. She'll go after him tooth and nail. It doesn't matter if she's 5'2" and he's 6'8", because now her mind is showing her what is irritating, and she's so peeved that she's going to take him apart. So that was, if that's the accurate story that I was talking about, there was the point of that story, is to just see how different the perceptual construct can be based on which filter is active and what the mind is showing us.
Okay. Got it.
Make sense?
Yeah. When you started explaining, you said two things, and the second one was, if it's fear, then you see this. But if it's, I missed what you said. Was it anger or hostility? I don't know if you can go back.
The three filters.
Okay.
Yeah, there are three filters.
Hostility,
fear, and Rachma. Over perception, hostility, fear, and Kuba, over intention, and hostility, fear, and Kuba over perception. And depending which filter is active will determine which reality the mind is generating.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks.
Okay. Does that make sense of it all?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
That's good.
Anything else we can support you with?
There, you put it right. Because other thoughts about that? No. But I did have a thought about the fact that I am using my iPhone as the way one would use alcohol, I think. If I'm not aware, I grab my phone to check my email because I might be bored or I'm a little bit uncomfortable or upset about something, and instead of dealing with it, I just check my email. And I'm noticing that, and I'm putting some restraints on. And, you know, the way the iPhone is set up, I don't know about you, but it's probably true for you. Whenever I open my email, I have 25 or 35 new emails. Most of them I just delete, but I feel this urge to check. Anyway, it's just worth looking at, and I'm trying to get mindful about it. It's sort of a Lenten practice. It's a little late. I mean, it's Holy Week already, but it never hurts to start.
Right.
Putting some limits and restraints on. I'll be okay. I won't miss anything if I don't take my phone with me when I walk around the block. Even that. I mean, it's hard for me to leave my phone away from me. And I'm just saying that. I don't know what your experience is, but it's really a challenge.
Well, you know, there's when you remember that when we achieve a goal, we get a hit of dopamine, literally in the brain. There's a shot of dopamine, and that's like the happy powder. And I think that the people who manufacture our phones, our devices, know that that's true and set it up so that we get that hit of dopamine.
Yep.
And when you realize that that can become an addiction, and as you're doing, you start to effort moving in a different direction, you get to experience it differently.
You experience
that would be my take.
What differently? Experience what differently?
You get to refrain from being addicted to dopamine, and you wake up to the state of being and not requiring that little addictive shot. You know, it's like people get up in the morning, they need their shot of caffeine because they think that's where they get energy, and where in fact the reverse happens. When they use a shot of caffeine, it actually weakens the adrenals and their energy level goes down. So they need more and more and more of it, and that's the way all addictions work. So it's a nice catch. It sounds like a piece of work to do.
It is a piece of work to do. Okay, thanks.
For sure.
Thanks
all
for
right,
the report. No, so glad you had a great weekend time.
So are we.
Sabbatical.
So are we. Thanks for your support. All right, lots of love, everybody. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Jean? It's going to cut us off in a second.
I was just going to say, I put a link in the codependence page for the intensive, and I'll put it in the notes for today on the radio show where you can look up those filters for the mind.
Great.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, sweetie. All right, everybody. Be blessed. Bye-bye.